Hi, good evening. This is Barb Bacon. I'm a community advocate here in South Charlotte. Generally, I drive people around and to doctor's appointments, and I'm getting ready to have my sign-up list for taking people to vote. Buttons, once again, are, I believe in healthcare for all. I've got some people that don't believe in Medicare for all. Gun violence, let's get some control of guns. And Black Lives Matter in honor of our friend Joel that passed away last year. So that's it, guys.
Hello, this is Jenny-Jaymes Gunn. I am a community advocate here in Charlotte, North Carolina for LGBT women's rights with the National Organization for Women, gun sense laws with Moms to Men Action, and anything that extends equity to all. Thank you.
Hey, I'm Christian Cano. You're the co-host. My buttons are Moms to Men Action, gun sense legislation, healthcare for all, Medicare for all, and also in my heart, Black Lives Matter on behalf of Joe Oldham, who's a guest of ours who passed away last year. That's it. There's some
here
music.
It says, okay.
Yep, there we go. Yep, we're going. Well, welcome everyone. Good morning, Dr. B. We haven't seen you in such a long time.
Been hiding out.
Yes. Well, welcome everyone to Coffee Pan Dulce. I'm Christian Cano, one of your co-hosts, along with Barb Bacon and Jenny Gunn. Jenny Gunn's on a hiatus until February, and Barb hopefully will be joining us this morning. Today is actually January the 18th when you see this show, Wednesday. As those who've been watching us the last couple of weeks know that we now tape on Monday mornings early, so that way it gives me time to edit and throw out anything that we say that we don't want anyone else to hear. So I want to welcome everyone who's joining us on Facebook Live, but also those who join us on YouTube, and those thousands who now listen to us on your favorite audio podcast platform. Like we said last week, when Barb and I did, actually it was probably 2 weeks ago, when Barb and I did the at the end of the year show, our numbers for 2022 are in. We had over 300,000 viewers and 500,000 listeners in 2022. Wow, if only we had like a penny for every one of those. So anyway, so Dr. B, thank you. You are actually like 2 hours ahead of me. So this is—
Or behind.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, that's right. Behind, that's right. So this is early for you. Is this the time you normally wake up?
It's a little bit early, but we're doing just fine. I have,
because I know you wake up like every morning at 6. Yeah. I know you wake up every morning at 6 and go like jogging and
yeah, I wish. Yeah,
swimming and in your retirement.
Hardly.
Yeah. So today's topic is, does America need open borders? And we wanted to invite Dr. B because I know you have been reading up on this a lot. And the last time you were on here, you kind of mentioned something about it. But before we do that, we're going to actually we have to pause just a moment so that way we can explain to you about Manolo's Bakery.
Hey y'all, the holidays are coming up, and what better way to celebrate locally but with Manolo's Bakery's fine goods and services. They have amazing chocolate cakes is what they're known for. Tres Leches cakes, tamales. Get your tamales orders in early, especially if you're going to order for Thanksgiving, because they sell out fast. But they have an amazing bakery and restaurant there on the east side of Charlotte, and you're missing out. Plus, you should support your Black and brown businesses and shop local and shop small to really keep the economy going. Thanks for watching, and shop with Manolo's this year.
All right. Well, don't forget, as the ad said, go visit Manolo's Bakery. Even after the holidays, they're even better. So now we're going to actually talk about Barb's 3 current events. That's the little, you have to watch this, Dr. B. There's a little intro for Barb's three current events. All right. So Barb's three current events, and Barb hopefully will be joining us here so she can comment on any of those. And Dr. B, of course, you're welcome to. A QAnon activist who was part of the whole movement about saying top Democrats are child abusers and pedophiles. It's this whole thing that's been going on since Hillary Clinton, and it's gotten they've really ramped it up with gays and drag queens are pedophiles, and teachers in public schools are groomers, and this thing they're using. Well, it turns out, and I don't mean to laugh this way, but it turns out that he was actually convicted of abusing an 8-year-old boy. Go figure. There's a documentary. Yeah, exactly. There's a documentary on HBO that just came out, and this kind of person who's like a influencer, social media person, followed these QAnon people and the Proud Boys during the insurrection over the last 2 years, and interviewed him several times. And he's the one who actually uncovered it because he was going to follow this guy. He lives in North Carolina, and he was going to follow him to the January 6th, but the person couldn't leave the state. He never knew why. So he did his own investigation and find out that he was actually a convicted pedophile. And so I don't know if you want to comment on that. The other one goes a little bit into our topic today. I thought it quite amusing. Well, we're taping this, full disclosure, we're taping this on January 11th. It doesn't drop until the 18th. Well, on January 10th, which was a Tuesday, Donald J. Trump issued a statement announcing once again his candidacy for president of the United States, and it's all based on border security. So he must be watching the show, because that is what he wants to be the number one issue in 2024. And basically he says, interesting that now people are talking about the border. When he was running in 2016, he was the only one talking about the border, and he didn't talk about the border in 2020 because it wasn't an issue, but it's become an issue yes. So then he talks about, how over the last 2 years, it's been outrageous and so forth. But I just think it's really kind of funny, because he ends this thing by saying, he just wants to let everyone know that he is running for president to make America great and glorious again. So he is running specifically on the border. And then the last one, which I just find kind of interesting, Ted Cruz, a favorite person of our show, when the Houston, was it the Astros won the World Series? Is that who it was?
They did.
Yeah. Okay. When they did the parade and Ted Cruz was in the parade, one of the persons in the parade threw a can of hard seltzer at him, and Ted Cruz's security got him, and he was arrested. Well, the charges were dropped because it turns out he wasn't trying to hit Ted Cruz. He was actually throwing for him to catch, because that's what they do in Houston during parades. They they give him beer. But the article just talks about how embarrassing this is for Ted Cruz, because Ted Cruz is so paranoid that someone's going to hit him. He didn't realize it, and he just instinctively ducked. And so those are the three topics. Would you like to comment?
I don't want to waste my breath talking about Ted Cruz.
Okay.
As far as Trump running on the border, we'll get into this whole kind of border thing, but Trump will run on whatever the issue of the moment is. So I'm sure now that we've had these disclosures about, Biden's office kind of having one or two probably inconsequential classified documents. Oh, now he's going to run on that, so ignore that. Yep. As far as these QAnon kind of folks and the pedophiles, I don't have any proof of this, but it seems to be a consistent observation that the folks who make the loudest protests to get something like,
exactly.
homosexuality or racism or any of these things, religion, the ones that are screaming the most usually kind of have something in their closet. And there's some kind of fundamental root level kind of fear and anxiety that drives their kind of overreacting to this stuff. So, it's so interesting. It just kind of keeps going. The folks, and it tends to be not exclusively, but it often is in the Republican fold. they're all this pro-family, and they're turned out to have 3 mistresses in the closet, and they're anti-gay, and they turn out to have had a homosexual encounter in college, all this kind of stuff. So, just need to kind of think about what's motivating all this passionate outcry that generally kind of has to do with taking away somebody's rights. So.
Well, I completely agree. And, there's this term, and it's interesting because I actually watched the documentary last night. And the first thing I think of is what Jenny always says, one of our other co-hosts, projecting, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
indeed.
so
right.
we always, I agree with you. Anytime that we hear someone say something, my first instinct is to say, usually the one who screams the loudest is the one trying to distract you. And, it's not always the case, but usually, because why would you be concerned about drag queens unless you're around drag queens? I mean, I don't see it here and go, oh my goodness, Baptist preachers, this, because I don't attend a Baptist church. And so there's this interesting dynamic. And usually whenever you hear something occur, it's usually someone who's projecting. And the HBO documentary, the gentleman actually talks about, he asked the gentleman, he said, do you know what the term projecting is? And he was at a diner, and the guy kind of like, I don't think he knew what it meant, but he said that he's fighting hard to bring these people. So it's almost like he has dedicated his life to destroy whatever's in him or something. It was just a weird, anyway, so I completely agree with you. And then the Trump border thing we're about to talk about here in a second.
Before you go on that, if you remember not too long ago, when all the Republicans were concerned about all this voter fraud, and then what turns up, Mark Meadows, committed voter fraud. It's like, oh man, really? So,
no, I agree with you. And that's why this IRS thing that's, they just passed legislation. When you're watching this, it's last week. It won't actually get signed to eliminate 86,000 IRS agents that they just funded. And it's almost like, well, the only reason you would scream loud about IRS agents if you're afraid an IRS agent's going to come after you. I know. And because if they were really concerned about IRS agents, they would say, okay, the law should say if you're making less than $4 million, we're not going to look at you as actively as over $4 million. And so they're saying they're protecting middle class people, but they're really not protecting middle class people. They're protecting people who make a lot of money, because those are the people who can afford to kind of bypass. But the Ted Cruz thing, I just think is so funny. But it is interesting. He's going to run in 2024 because over the last 2 months, he's kind of quieted down a little bit, and he does this all the time so that way he can change like what people think about him before he runs. And so Marjorie Taylor Greene's doing the same thing. She's trying to like sound normal now. And so, but the good news is your friend Laura Boebert is kind of helping her stay crazy because they're in a cat fight. So, all right. Those are the 3 current events. They weren't that exciting, but I just thought they were kind of funny. So Barbara, I'm sorry you missed this one. We're going to take our first break, and then we'll be right back to talk about our topic on Coffee and Pan Dulce. Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching our Coffee and Pan Dulce show every week. Don't forget you can watch us visually on our video podcast platforms on Facebook and YouTube, but you can also listen to us on your favorite audio podcast platforms like Apple, Amazon, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and all of the other ones that your favorite, whatever your favorite is. Once again, thank you for watching us on Coffee and Pan Dulce. We'll dance out. Well, welcome back. And so today's topic, does America need open borders? So I'm very curious to what you have to say. As usual, whenever we have a topic, I go to the Google machine and I type in, does America need open borders? And of course, there's pros and cons. And I would be curious because growing up in Texas, I know you grew up in Texas as well, Dr. B, but it does seem like that is a very, very important topic for those who support Trump. And I know in Texas, it has become a very important topic for Tejanos, native Texans. It's an important topic as well, which is why Governor Abbott talks about it a lot, because he knows that's something that they are interested in. But I think it's for different reasons. So, Dr. B, what are your thoughts about our borders in general? I was fairly ignorant of this. And when there was all this
incidents came up over the last couple of years with all the caravans and all these terrible things at the border. I didn't have the solution. I didn't know what the right thing to do was. I mean, it seems crazy to kind of say, oh, anybody that wants to come to America can come in, the open border policy. But it also seems just harsh and un-American and uncivil and un-Christian and all sorts of things to turn these people away who are, fleeing for their lives. And I know not all of them are fleeing for their lives. A lot of them just want a better way of life. Well, that's what brought my ancestors to the United States. They were looking for a better way of life than what they had in northern Germany.
Exactly.
So, and all the other waves of immigrants we had. So, my first thought is when you ask somebody who wants a closed border, you kind of ask them, why do you want that? And the first thing you hear about is, well, because we can't handle them in these border communities or overrunning human resources and stuff like that. And so then it's like, well, how about if you move beyond the border into the entire country of 325, 30 million folks that we got? What's your concern about, 20,000 or 100,000 or 150,000 more people coming in? And that's kind of when it's hard to get a straight answer. And what I perceive, kind of like this projecting and the other thing that you talked about a minute ago, is that underlying all of this, 100%, is this fear of replacement theory. And that is that most people, not all, but I think most people who want this border policy, a closed border, are white.
Mm-hmm.
And I think their vision for America is it will continue to be a white country, which is a little bit at odds with the vision of the folks that we replaced, 400 or 500 years ago, the Native Americans. So we're all immigrants, but like most people in history, you want everything to stay just the way it is right now. It's just fine. Don't change anything because I'm okay. But then, so anyway, if you can say folks, are afraid that brown people and people of color are going to take over the United States. I really think at the core, that's what's driving it. So why don't you say something so I don't talk all the time, then we'll go on to this.
No, I completely agree with you, because I was curious if you were, from your perspective on because I know you grew up in South Texas. And so I do have a question about that, but I do want to read for you this institute, the Connecticut Institute did a pros and cons about open borders. And the pros, they said, open borders make it easier for people to travel, can save us plenty of time. Open borders make supply chains more efficient, encourages international trade, makes transportation cheaper. Open borders make it easier for people for you to visit family members, encourages migration. There's a whole list of wonderful things. The cons are migration may become a problem, makes it easier to smuggle unwanted things into the country, may lead to exploitation of the welfare state, can lead to problems with the national debt, and so on. So I understand those are like your typical kind of pros and cons. To me, this is like free market kind of idea. I've always felt like open borders were, I guess maybe growing up in Texas, I was never concerned about the border because my family has always been in Texas. And so I know in Texas right now, there's this unique dynamic, and we've been talking about this over the last year about the Tejano vote, the Tejano community. And, the Tejano voter is an indigenous person who is from central Texas to northern Mexico. And many of the families, like part of my family, have been there since the late 1700s, 1800s. They've been in that land. Of course, we've all married throughout. Sure. And so it's all very diverse. But one of the things is, growing up, I never felt like the borders were unsafe because that's where we were from. But I have noticed over the last 20 years, some Tejanos whose family members have been there forever, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, more generations, even members many of them who don't speak Spanish anymore, who live in San Antonio, who live around the areas and even in North Texas, they are now they're concerned about the border because the people coming over are Mexican. They're Central American, South American. So they have bought into this rhetoric, similar to what you said. It's those, because they almost consider themselves more whiter And they're the more darker individuals. And so, because Jenny used to ask me all the time, why would your family be against the borders? I said, it's the bizarrest thing. But now that when I go back to Texas, they talk about how, it's growing so fast, traffic is this, and there's a term that we use in our community, which I'm not going to use, and they would use that term, that those are coming over here. Yeah. And I'm thinking, I'm like, I don't know where all this is coming from, but I understand why they're saying that is because they have bought into this rhetoric that this is somehow hurting them, which it's not. And so I find what you say very interesting, because when you think around if you are a true capitalist or, like a free market libertarian, you don't want restrictions on how business trades, or you don't want restrictions on immigration, on being able to. So when I look at this rhetoric, and when I look at the Republicans and I look at what Trump is saying, first thing I think is, okay, if you're concerned about it, what is your solution? And there is no solution, just like with everything else that you've talked about, that we've always talked about. If open borders or if borders are important to Republicans or whoever, I'll hear you, but tell me what your solution is. Are you for like this immigration reform bill, or something? But there is no solution. They just want to complain about it. And so I don't know if that's how you feel, or if you, because I'm concerned about the border, but I'm concerned about all of our borders, south and north. And to your point about kind of, it's maybe the underlining kind of racism kind of thing. I agree with you, because the people who are concerned about the border, they don't talk about the northern border, and they don't talk about smuggling that comes in through New York State and all of those. There's just a fence there, like a wire fence. And there's smuggling that goes across there all the time. And one more point, and then I'm gonna shut up and let you talk a little bit as well. I read this article that I thought was very interesting. Open borders already exist. If you have enough money, there is no such thing as a closed border, because you can go anywhere. It's the people who can't afford passports, who can't afford a plane ride or hotel room, that borders are closed. Because if you have enough money and you live in Mexico City, you can fly from Mexico City to Charlotte, North Carolina with just a passport, as long as you show that you're in a hotel room, and overstay your visa and be here. You don't have to pay the $3,000 smuggling fee, whatever they pay to get smuggled. So open borders already exist for people who have the money. The borders are only closed for people who don't have the money. So that's my...
I mean, this is a huge topic, isn't it? And you could talk about it all day, all the different aspects of it. One thing about the indigenous Hispanics in the Southwest resisting this new wave. When I started educating myself about racism and kind of how we got here, it turns out that that there are a whole lot of Black folks that have come to the United States since slavery was overturned, right? I mean, they come from all over. And it seems that there's kind of a racism between Blacks who are descendants of slaves and Blacks who came here later, because the ones who came here later tend to be in the so-called exceptional class. They have had to do something to, like you say, afford this plane ride, the hotel room, and things like that, to be able to kind of get their way in the United States. So they view themselves as a little bit superior to these riffraff descendants of poor slaves. So there's kind of a within the Black community in the United States, kind of a racism, and that's one of many. We have colorism with the darker ones and the lighter, all that kind of stuff. But it's interesting to me. I never thought about this before, that the arrivals since slavery view themselves as a little bit superior, and that may be with the Hispanics that are coming from these other kind of countries. Or maybe the indigenous ones now consider themselves superior to these interlopers that are coming from these other countries. But I mentioned this fact that it takes a certain amount of effort to get off your butt wherever you are and get in a caravan and find $5,000 to pay a mule. That takes initiative. And so, if you're given your choice, who do you want in the United States as a resident and ideally one of these days as a citizen. You know, somebody who maybe kind of grew up here and has been a slacker his whole life, or somebody who kind of woke up one day in Honduras or in Nicaragua and kind of said, I'm getting out of here. You know, things need to get better. And they have demonstrated the initiative and the ingenuity and the resourcefulness. Isn't that what we want? You know, isn't that what we need in our population, is more people with that kind of motivation? And when you say, oh, it's the rapists and the thugs, you know, no, we all know that's crazy, ridiculous, unfounded Trump rhetoric. Of course, you get 100,000 people; they're not all going to be angels, no matter what group you're picking them from. So, you know, I really like this idea of the immigrant vigor, and you know, and then that speaks immediately to, you know, after all these storms in Florida, everybody says, who's going to repair those roofs and clear these yards and do the landscaping? Undocumented, you know, immigrants. So we need them. Yeah.
Well, no, and that's like, oh, that's okay, Barbara. And that's a completely whole other topic. And we're going to take just our second break here so we can bring Barbara into the fold, and I can edit some of this out. So we'll take our second break on Coffee and Pan Dulce right after this.
Hi, I'm Christian Cano. Thank you so much for joining us on Coffee and Pan Dulce. And also thank you so much for watching us on Facebook and on YouTube. But also don't forget, you can actually listen to us on your favorite audio podcast platform like Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon, Deezer, Podcast Addict, Podcast Chaser, and others. Once again, thank you for so much for watching us and listening to us on Coffee and Pan Dulce. Have a great day.
Welcome back, everyone. And so now we have Barb Bacon with us, and Barb, you look good. I hope you're feeling better. I know, like, you've joined the other millions of Americans with either the flu, COVID, RSV.
Yeah.
I don't mean to laugh, but
strep throat, cold.
There's so many things going on.
Exactly.
Oh my goodness.
Walk outside, breathe, and catch something else. Yep.
Yeah. You know what? Let's do the camera, but I do have a question for you, Dr. B. I'm gonna write this down because I do have a question, a medical question, and I know you should be answering these online. But all right. So Barb, the three current events were there was a HBO documentary that was just released, and one of the big QAnon conspiracy persons who lives in North Carolina, who's been pushing this pedophiles and baby eaters and stuff like that, turns out was convicted years ago of molesting an 8-year-old boy. And so he himself is a pedophile. And that came out in the documentary that was just released on HBO. Also, Trump announced on Tuesday, the 10th, that he is running for president again, and his issue is going to be borders. And he said that when he was running in 2020, the reason he didn't talk about borders is because it wasn't an issue. It wasn't an issue until Biden became president, and now he's going to fix it. That's the second one. Yeah, and then Ted Cruz, the person who threw the beer can at Ted Cruz, the charges were dropped because it turns out he wasn't actually trying to hit Ted Cruz. He was trying to throw him a beer. Ted Cruz just ducked. So, yeah, I know that's kind of funny. So do you want to comment on any of those?
Do I have to?
No, no, we can go directly into the...
No, I'm trying to save my voice. So
okay, I get it. All right. Yeah. So all right. Well, that was easy. We answered all of them for Dr. B and I. So Dr. B, to your thing about the more of the like the Tejanos and the people who lived in Texas, the native Texans, New Mexico, California, kind of the southern Arizona, not as much in Arizona, but especially southern Arizona. One of the things that I've noticed, and if anyone has a chance, there is a documentary that came out on PBS about 2 years ago during Hispanic Heritage Month, and it talks about the Hispanic culture and the differences between California Hispanics or Latinos, whatever term you use. We use Latinx, you know, whatever term you use, the ones in New Mexico and the ones in Texas, and the very big difference in why they were influenced. The California Hispanics from more Mexican heritage, culture heritage, I guess is the term you use. They're more Chicanos. The ones in New Mexico held on to their land longer. And to this day, still, they actually, if you watch the documentary, they actually put hoods on, like the KKK, and chased the white people out of New Mexico when they were trying to take over the land. And the ones in Texas succumbed to the white people that were taking over the land, and they intermarried within the families. That's why you have such a difference between Texas Hispanics, New Mexico Hispanics, and California Chicanos. It's a very big difference. But the one thing that I noticed growing up, and I don't know if people who watch this, our biggest markets are Texas and Florida who watch this. One of the things that I noticed is a Tejano. First of all, we didn't call ourselves Tejanos. We called ourselves Texans. And I never, growing up, checked Hispanic, Tejano, anything on anything, voter registration, college, even though I got a Hispanic scholarship to attend TCU, I didn't check Hispanic, or Mexican American, whatever term we were using at the time. Even to this day, my driver's license, well, it says white. Our birth certificates, I was told never to check that because you would be discriminated against. And so I grew up in an era where we embraced the 43% of us that was European rather than the 57% or whatever that was Tejano. And it seems like that is the group that is concerned about, that has aligned with people like Abbott and the Republican Party, because to them, it's like the other people, the ones that are checking themselves Hispanic, Latino, whatever, those are the ones that it's kind of a classism as well, I think. And I don't know exactly like how to, but I found that, I know that that's not the same case in California, because in California, they tend to be very proud to be Chicanos, proud to be of Mexican heritage. In New Mexico, it's different because they've always been that way. In Arizona, it's a little bit different, but I do find Texas very different. And Barbara asked this question about Florida. Florida is a completely different. It's nothing like the other ones. You have the Cubanos, the Puerto Ricans, the Haitians, the Dominicans. You have all of these other cultures in there that have influenced it. So, the open border, the border thing is a big issue for Latinos or Hispanic voters, just for different reasons. And so it's smart for Trump to, I understand why they're doing this, is because they think they're going to get some Hispanic people that maybe vote Democrat. They're going to chip some of them off. And even Black Americans, a lot of them are concerned about immigration because they have had to, many of them have had to struggle. The last thing they want is more competition on being, and it's really about competition. So one of the things that I've always said is, if you're against, and I know this is not, it's kind of a joke, but if you're afraid that an immigrant is going to take your job, you must have a really crappy job.
Yeah.
And so whenever I hear someone talking about these immigrants are coming, there's a joke on South Park. I don't know if anybody watches that cartoon. There's a joke on South Park where there's a character that always says, "They're taking our jobs. They're taking our jobs." And it's kind of a joke because everyone else is going, well, he's got the crappiest job in the whole town. And so I don't know, Barb, I mean, you lived in Texas for a while. I mean, this border issue, we're all concerned about the border. It's just like for different reasons. And so you want to add anything to my rant about borders?
Well, all I know is that my family that's in Texas, they're all Republicans. And as far as they're concerned, you can just shut the border down completely. We don't need any other people. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Who's going to work in the fields and are you guys going to do that? Listen to your friends in California. They don't have enough workers to do what we need to do to survive. Who's going to do that? Certainly not white people, excuse my language, but that's the truth. And Art's got a very good friend that his whole family's in southern Florida, and they're from Cuba. Now, they believe that the Democrats are socialists. So that is going around down there. And that, I guess that's why I asked the question about what's going on in Florida, because the Democrats lost a lot of votes in the midterms.
Especially Miami.
They're attributing that to the whole spread of they're socialists, and you don't want to do that. And Alex, that's Art's good friend, says, my family believes that. I said, well, how do you change that? And they just said the Democrats don't do any job to try to change that. And I'm like, oh, God. So I don't know. But every area that has the different people from different countries, they have different issues. And I don't think we're on top of it enough to know how to address it. But I don't know. It's very confusing to me because I don't understand enough about their cultures, where they come from, and what their perspective would be when they're listening to a Democrat or a Republican. But if they can't figure out that the Republicans are lying all the time, then we really have a problem. So I don't know.
That's an excellent point. Before, Dr. B, I'd like for you to comment on that. Before we say that, I do want to, for those who watch this show, if you notice that now it's Free Market Bernie is over there with his sign, Made in America by Immigrant Hands. That's actually a bumper sticker from Manolo's Bakery. And then we also have MAGA Border Baby Trump Pinata that is joining us, and they're anxiously listening to this. But one of the things I was just reminded by what you just said, Barb, when you talk about the Cubanos and people often ask who aren't a member of the Latino, like LatinX community, Hispanic community, how on earth can a Hispanic vote for Trump when he is so racist and his bigotry and the people who support him are? And the reason is because there are some people in the community that think, well, he's not really talking about me, he's talking about them. And so when Trump says these drug dealers, these rapists are coming over from the border, members of my family, and I'm just going to say my family because I've not very been watched the show, they have always been in Texas. So they think, well, he's not talking about us because we've always been here. He's talking about them, kind of what I was saying earlier. The Cubanos, the Cubanos think, because I'm generalizing, they tend to think like they're more Spaniards than Latin Americans, or they don't consider themselves to be from Latin America. They're more Caribbean kind of individuals and so forth. They don't think they're talking about them because they didn't come over a border. They came differently. And so it's interesting to hear when you hear these individuals that you go, well, this is actually how, I mean, people go, I don't know how Texas can keep voting for Republicans when they're, 57% Hispanic voting. And so, well, the reason is because if you're past your second or third generation in America, you believe they're not talking about you, they're talking about them. So I just find that very interesting. And the same, I'll have to say this, the same in the LGBTQ community. When people talk about gays or drag queens or groomers, if you're a wealthier white gay person or a lesbian, they're not talking about me, they're talking about those ones, And so there's this denial, like, well, I don't mind them talking about drag queens because at least they're not talking about us, and or I don't mind them talking about transgender people because, God, for many years I was having to fight for my own rights. And so I'm just enjoying it. It's just denial kind of stuff. And so anyway, I kind of went on that page there.
That's really complicated, though, because it's different for every group, right?
That's what makes the Republican strategy work with so little Republicans, is because they catch on to these things that all they need is to shave a couple people off and then disenfranchise these people, and then they win these elections. Because if, like here in North Carolina, if the big counties, Wake County, or Durham County, and Mecklenburg County, if we turned out at the same percentages as Fulton County in Atlanta, that area, Republicans could not win statewide, but we don't. we turn out at much lower rates in the rural areas. And so, so that's really, and you look at Texas, if Dallas, Fort Worth, Austin, San Antonio, Houston, all of the 6 big cities in the counties they represent turned out at even 50% of their voting measurement, Texas would be blue forever because they're all blue cities. And so all you have to do is you don't have to win people over, you just have to kind of lose people for the other, and that's kind of their strategy. So anyway, back to borders. So Dr. B, you grew up in South Texas. Did you have a problem? I don't know if I should say this, but because you're probably going to say, yeah, I didn't run them over. Was there a free flow of like commerce?
Yeah. I don't. Being a kid, pay attention to most of this kind of stuff. But they did have the Bracero program back then, and looking back at it, it was almost like legalized slavery. I mean, they would haul these trucks of poor, folks from Mexico over and put them up in these literal hovels, these probably unplumbed, these shacks, and work them all day long, and make them buy anything they wanted at the company store kind of thing, and then they'd ship them back after something. So that was on the one hand kind of a horrific program. It might have had some merit, but speaking of workforce, I think I mentioned earlier weeks ago that in trying to get an answer about this whole border thing, I looked around for what kind of books would best explain it. And I found one. It's not brilliantly written, but it's by a guy who evidently has some bona fides and did a lot of research and whatnot. And the title of the book is something like 1 Billion Americans. And so we currently have like 325, 330 million. And he says our country could accommodate 1 billion people without any kind of problem. We got plenty of space. And he said that would not only take care of all these jobs that need doing right now, but it would also bring in, as I mentioned, this vigor, this creativity and resourcefulness of a huge number of people that would add to all sorts of innovation and whatnot.
Sure.
So I'm sure he's being a little bit facetious, although he makes a point that we're not going to suddenly have 1 billion people, but we could certainly take a few 100,000. It just wouldn't stretch anything. So all this panic, to me, that book kind of says we got nothing to worry about with people coming over the border, because like I say, most people in all these foreign countries would rather stay where they are if they're not getting murdered by gangs or things like that. And most people like their home, even though they may be poor and whatnot. Everybody doesn't want to come here. So I think there's this hyper kind of anxiety about, we'll be overrun by everybody. No, we won't. But we will be accommodated by some folks who are grateful to be here, who are happy to work in crappy conditions that you and I don't want to do, and contribute to the overall economy and welfare of the United States. So I'm developing a notion that we ought to have essentially more open borders. And if not 100%, we'll, at least substantially raise our quotas to if you're having a problem, worried about getting killed, welcome in. And, I think we can be a lot looser.
Here's a question that I have for both of you. I don't know, Barb, you want to comment before I ask the question?
Well, I was listening to some of the news Sunday morning, not really watching it, but listening to it. And they were talking about what a fallacy Biden is talking about, that if we just had a few more judges and this, that, and the other, that we could start turning these trials or I guess I don't even understand the process that they have to go through to get into the United States. And if we could just make that process a little smoother, it would be better, because we really are sending people back. And you could tell the people that didn't believe it because they didn't ask any questions. They just sat there with these looks on their faces. So I haven't done my homework on the border, but it appears to me that they're trying to do something about it, but I don't know.
So one of the articles I read was an op-ed, and basically it was in the New Yorker, and it was probably 2 years old. And basically the gist of that article was both sides, but mainly Republicans who represent more of the business community, don't want a solution to the border because they want the ability to keep wages low, artificially low. And one of the reasons why whenever they talk about borders, it usually wins blue collar white voters or even black and brown union members is because they want wages to go up. And when you have these under the table wages, it brings borders down. Like in North Carolina, there are very few construction sites that are unionized. And as a result, we have a lot of accidents, a lot of deaths. They tend to be Latinos who die. We just had 3 less than a week ago who fell off of a crane construction. And if they were unionized, unions require inspections daily, which raises the cost of construction. And so one of the reasons why many people don't want those is because if you're a fight for 15 person, it's harder to get your wages up when the restaurant's going to hire people under the table to wash dishes. And so there is an artificial lowering of wages by not having immigration reform. The thing that I've always wondered is, to me, and just curious what y'all have to think about, because with wages and crime, immigration court, to me, there seems to be not a simple answer, but a very obvious answer. If your concern is about open borders and the cost to the American taxpayer or whatever crime, whatever the case may be, then why don't we do what the European Union is doing now, and is not perfect, but it's better than what we have, and allow traveling from NAFTA, from our 3 neighboring states, a little bit more freely. And if you want to work in the United States, you must be registered. You must have some type of tax, Social Security, EIN number. You have to pay taxes because you don't get benefits if you're not a U.S. citizen. So you would pay into the tax system. You wouldn't get the benefits, but you would pay. And so that would shut up the people who say, oh, they're taking our welfare. No, they're not, because they don't qualify for it. And they currently don't qualify for it anyway. And so that's kind of a false argument. But more importantly, to me, how you stop people from coming over here, even if you did nothing, is we make, and this is controversial, because my uncle actually told me this, and I thought, oh, I could never say this, but you move coming across here undocumented, you move that from a civil penalty to a criminal penalty, because as long as it's a civil penalty, some people don't take it as seriously as when it's a criminal penalty. And because our immigration courts are in civil court, they don't get attorneys automatically. They have to hire their own attorneys. But once it becomes criminal, our Constitution allows them to have an attorney to defend themselves, but not necessarily to punish the people coming over, but to punish the people that are hiring them. So if you hire someone to do your yard who's not documented, it's a crime. And once you put these crimes into these butch, where they cut cows. What is that called? like poultry.
Yeah.
Well, like poultry plants and all these, where a lot of these clusters, especially in the north.
Slaughterhouses, you mean?
Slaughterhouses.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to say. Once you penalize these companies for hiring many undocumented people, the hope is it's going to reduce, because
I thought they did that several years ago. I thought there was some law that you had to. Now people found workarounds, and they'll always find workarounds.
Mm-hmm.
You hire contract people. In the hotel business, see, that's what we did. They passed the E-Verify thing. I don't know if you ever remember that.
Yeah, that's it. Exactly. Right.
Okay. Yeah, and every company had to do E-Verify. So most of our hotels, we started contracting your housekeepers out. So they no longer work for us. we
Yeah.
hire them like day laborers.
Right.
And
Like braceros.
it's yes, exactly. That's kind of what it is. And so there's no penalty for me because I did everything I could. They're the ones I don't know if, and that's what they're doing now. And so I don't know what the solution is. All I know is that it's I don't know. Anybody have any
the solution is open the border. And
yes,
not it's similar to, we talk a whole lot about Medicare for all. And my biggest thing about Medicare for all is, good Lord, the amount of energy and money and time we're spending with all these regulations and who does this and what you qualify and blah, blah, blah. It's like, let's just cut that all out and everybody pay taxes and everybody has health care and we don't have to do all this rigmarole. It was just cut through it. And I feel the same way about the border situation. We're trying everything and it's not working because people are desperate and because we need more immigrants in this country. So it's like, well, let's kind of cut out this crap. You want to come. And you don't have to worry about a court, who's being hired, all that kind of stuff. Make it easier, and I think everybody would benefit. But as with Medicare for all, as with racism, as with, sex and gender discrimination, there's a whole lot of really deep-seated underlying anxiety that drives all of the rest of this.
Yeah.
So, people talk about expanding Medicaid in North Carolina. It's like, well, the problem is racism. And until you talk about that, we're not going to get very far because everybody's talking about the numbers and, it would save money and, blah, blah, blah. That's all just a smokescreen. But people are not comfortable getting down to these core issues, are they? So we have all this kind of fluff and smoke that's obscuring the real fundamental kind of problem.
Yeah.
So that's my simple answer.
Well, excellent. And if you like Dr. B's simple answer, we're going to take our last break, only about 10 minutes left. You will like the show that comes on 30 minutes after this show on Wednesdays at 11:30. It's called Two Queers in a Truck. It's led by Jenny. It's in its encore presentation. So if you liked an old show maybe a year ago, you'll see it every week, at least until February. And so we're going to take our last break to talk about Jenny's show that comes on after this one.
Up next is Two Queers in a Truck with Jenny and Christian. And hope you guys tune in. We'll see you in about 15 to 20 minutes. Thank you. Bye.
Well, welcome back. So, Dr. B, to me, and Barb, I don't know what you think about this. The only way we're going to solve this issue, I'm sure it will be, the only way that the fastest way to solve this issue is for the Democratic Party to just say, okay, we're going to call your bluff, Republicans. We're going to call your bluff, Trump. We're going to close the borders. We're going to make it as strict as possible to come here. We're going to kick everybody out who is not documented. And we're going to do that over, and our time frame is going to what time frame? 2 years? We're going to do it within 2 years. We're going to pass legislation and then make it bipartisan, push it through. It will never pass because the cost that it would cost to send 11 million people, it would destroy our economy.
Yep.
Mortgage companies would go bankrupt because many documented people have homes. They own homes. They own cars. Their kids are in school, public education schools. The majority of people in public education schools are Black and brown. And 40% of the brown people's kids are from undocumented families. So public schools basically would be in charter schools would definitely close down. And so you wouldn't be able to have Christmas trees in North Carolina because no one would cut down Christmas trees. We are the America's capital for Christmas wreaths. You wouldn't be able to have Christmas wreaths. You wouldn't have oranges, avocados. You wouldn't have all the things that make this economy grow. People complain about not having enough workers at restaurants now. Imagine.
Oh yeah, that would be. Oh my God. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
That to me, that would be the fastest way to do it. I don't think they'd ever do it, but call the bluff and just say, "All right, I agree with you. We're going to do this." And then you would start to hear, hold on a second.
Okay, Christian, let's pick a state. Let's pick Texas and build a big fast wall and block everybody from coming into Texas and see what happens. And then see what Abbott does.
It would go crazy. You couldn't, North Carolina couldn't build because 30% of construction workers are not documented. We could not build, Charlotte would not have been able to build the way it has been over the last decade. And so
ever since the pandemic opened up, you look at a construction site, you don't see very many white people.
Well,
talking about this wall, and okay, let's go ahead and build a big wall. I don't think any responsible Democrat would do that because we realize how ridiculous that would be, and that all of the statistics show that if you did build a wall, then you're going to have more people coming in boats and airplanes, and they are going to get here. If they've got the initiative, pay $5,000 and $10,000 to these meals, they will find a way to get here. And all the drugs, there's ample evidence that most drugs do not come across the border, or they will dig a tunnel under the fence like El Chapo or those other guys did. So it's just so patently absurd, but it's emotionally satisfying because it's very, very simple to envision. Oh, if we built a wall, that's all we have to do. We don't have to think about this further. We don't have to consider all the other aspects. It's simplicity. And most folks would rather have a simple answer to a problem than a complex one, right? And that's the appeal. And as long as folks are not willing to think about it, and I'm afraid that's the state of the human condition, people are going to be attracted to these simplistic solutions, whatever they are.
So Dr. B, I was just laughing a little bit because the last time I was in Texas was over Labor Day weekend of last year for a family reunion. And one of my uncles actually said to me, like most of my uncles, former military, said, we were talking, I don't know how he was talking about open borders, but we were talking about something. And he said, well, you wouldn't leave the doors of your house open, would you? So why would you? It was like, no, but I don't know how that has to do with that.
What does that have to do with it?
Because it's the same logic, simpleton logic talking points that they used during the Reagan administration when they were talking about trickle-down economics. And basically what they said is, your family doesn't write a check that you don't have money in the bank for, so why should the U.S. government? So logically you go, you're right, but you can't compare us to the U.S. government. We don't print our own money. And so that's how they get to people who just want simple solutions. They give them a simple line like, drag queens are pedophiles. All right, we got to blame somebody. Yep, that's who they are.
That was Hitler's entree, wasn't it? Blame the Jews.
Yep,
that's right.
It's all their problem, and that's just going to, and that echoes throughout history. There's always been xenophobia, and one of the most illuminating books I've read in the last few years about the racism is Caste, C-A-S-T-E. That talks about how, it doesn't have to be racism. It can be black on black, like we talked about with the recent immigrants versus slaves. It can be different colors of, or different generations of the brown population that you just discussed. So it's caste, and we all want somebody to kind of be able to kind of kick around, somebody less than me. And so any solution that brings that up, you're going to find a lot of folks supporting it, unfortunately.
Here's the good news, because we're trying to end on good news now.
Good luck with that.
I promised in 2023 I would try to be more positive.
That's good.
The good news is Gen Xers, Boomers, and above. This is a big issue for them, just like many other social kind of issues or whatever. Millennials, Baby Z's, it's not. They don't understand because they have always had the ability to travel wherever they want to travel, and it is not. They don't know the days where it just doesn't seem to be a big issue for them. There are different issues that they have, and so the good news is, as that population becomes even more and more important in voting, this issue is less and less important. And so you can tell by when Trump talks, he's not talking to millennials. He's not really even talking to Gen Zs. He's talking to late Gen Zs and boomers, because he uses these cheesy words like make America great and glorious. Younger generations will roll their eyes and go, that's the cheesiest thing I've ever heard. But there are other people who go,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
So, like, for example, when I was at not to bring back because we got to close the show. When I was at the TCU, Charlotte TCU national championship game that we almost came back. When I was at the game, when at the sports bar here in Charlotte, when the national anthem started to play during the game, late Gen Zs like me and older stood up and took our hats off. The younger people kept talking.
Yep.
That is the difference in the generations on things that we were taught to do. And that's not they're the ones that would kneel down during the national anthem. They're the ones that don't have it. That it's a different generation. And so in many ways, I'm glad that they're a little bit different than me because, even though I wish they'd shut up, so I can hear the game. So that's it. Anybody else want to say anything else before we go around and tell us where you're going to be?
Yeah, just the last thing is that I'm optimistic for the younger generation as well. But I tell you, anytime any of these complex issues is presented with racism at its disguised core, there's always going to be a whole lot of folks that are going to sign on to it. So I think that we just need to be constantly careful in every issue: sexism, racism, border, Medicare for all these kind of things, healthcare. Look out for the racism at the core of it before you kind of sign on and say, yeah, that's a good idea. I'm just afraid that it's been the story of history. It's not just the United States, but that's what I'm just discovering more and more underlies all this is discrimination.
Yeah.
Excellent point. So
I agree.
Thank you all. Yeah. Thank you so much. Oh, okay. So I got to do this free medical advice thing. You ready?
Okay.
I'm going to have to edit this out if we go really over.
On the air?
Dr. B.
Yeah.
Yes. So Dr. B. So, there
my advice is going to be see a real doctor.
That's good.
Bring it.
So they're talking about this is like the triple threat, RSV, flu, COVID, and so forth. So, how people have to be careful, make sure you have your flu, but there's not an RSV vaccination, but, everyone be careful. And a lot of people are getting sick who've attended family functions and so forth. So when I was at this, at the sports bar, I overheard someone saying the best way to get through this triple threat is to actually go out to make your immune system tougher.
What?
And so, yes, that was what I heard the people saying, that the reason they're going out is because they were at home for 2 years, that their immune system didn't catch these little things, and that's why people are being this person's not a doctor, but that's what apparently they believe. And of course, as they said that, I started to panic because I'm like, oh my God, are all these people really coming out to give me something to make me? So I started to reach for my mask, So is that actually a thinking? I mean, I don't want to get into that.
This all came up. This all came up a couple of years ago in the midst of the COVID thing. There was some study in Israel, and even though 98% of the Israeli population was vaccinated, this study did show that if you're not vaccinated and you get COVID, that gave you a pretty good antibody level, and that therefore this natural immunity. So that spread through the whole conservative blogosphere and all these talking points that natural immunity is better. That ignored the fact that a lot of people who got COVID naturally died, or ended up with terrible complications and huge medical expenses. So it's one of those that because it was a semi-legitimate scientific study. Supporting something against Fauci and against the mainstream American medical opinion, it got spread around. But no, that's ridiculous. That's like saying, well, let's everybody go get polio. Let's go get polio. Well, even though a minority of people get paralyzed, that'd be kind of a stupid thing to do. So anyway, that's crazy. No, natural immunity is not a good thing when you have a safe and effective vaccine.
Herd immunity didn't work either. Wasn't it Denmark that didn't vaccinate everyone? Oh my God.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
right. Yeah.
So, good news is I don't sit next to that group of individuals. So,
Well, the good
All right.
news is you
So-
better wear you ought to keep wearing a mask when you hang out at all these
Yes.
bars and things like
Well,
that,
it's
or
kind-
you're
it's
going
hard
to
to
you're going to
drink
get one of those other things. You know,
It's hard to drink Miller Lite.
if even just a cold, well, then lift it up or something.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
And if you're drinking
Okay.
Miller Lite, then you need to change your ways.
That's my natural immunity. Okay, that's it for us. We're going around the Brady Bunch screen. Dr. B, tell us who we're going to be, and then Barb, in 30 seconds or less, please.
Yeah, I'm out in California for the month. Colorado, same number of syllables. Out in Colorado, where our son lives. So we've spent a beautiful snowy Christmas here and are enjoying a little taste of winter. And then we'll be back in Charlotte 1st of February.
Good. Well, I'm going to just be hanging around getting better,
Good.
Hey,
laying low.
well, it's good.
I don't-
Well,
They told me today that if you don't do that, lots of people are getting rebound sick. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. So I'm not going to do
Yeah.
that.
yeah. Well, we are, I will be here camping or something. I'm looking forward to our trip we're actually going to Florida.
Mhm.
In February to go visit some family who have been there forever. So I'm a little nervous about going down there because this is the time of year where a lot of people go down there and catch stuff and bring it back. So we'll see how that works out. Well, thank you so much. Next week, we actually, cross your fingers, next week, which is when you see it, will be the last show of the 25th, the last show of January. We may actually have a registered Republican on the show.
Really?
We are crossing our fingers that this person will accept, because the title of our show is GOP's War on MAGA, and are there still good Republicans? We'll be talking about the GOP's trying to save themselves from the MAGA. Anyway, so that's our show. That's it. We'll act like there's music and we'll dance out. All right.
All right.
Bye, y'all. See you next week in Coffee and Pandusi. Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Coffee and Pandusi. Thank you, Dr. B. Thank you for waking up early in Colorado and joining us.
Good to see you. Dr.
Also,
B.
yeah, it's very good to see you. And Barb, thank you so much for making it directly from your appointment you had. Great, wonderful. We will see you next week in Coffee and Pandusi. Thank you very much. See you later.
Bye, everybody.
Next up, thanks for watching Coffee and Pan Dulce. Next up is Two Queers in a Truck. Stay tuned.